In 2020, during an informal conversation about gravity, disclosure, and the people she had met in Huntsville, Alabama, Amy Eskridge introduced two numbers.
Do you know what that is? They're us from the future. They're from here. They are you. They are me. They're from here, from the future. P47 is present plus 47,000 years. P52 is present plus 52,000 years.
47,000 years, 52,000 years, not distances from Earth, according to Amy, but distances from us in time.
And basically there's a calamity, right? So there's like a apocalypse scenario in the near future. It wipes out most of like everything, man. And there's the ones that go underground and survive, right? And then there's the ones that somehow stay on the surface and miraculously don't die.
That fragment would eventually become a complete online mythology, a catastrophe, two human lineages, the beings we call Greys, and a conflict over whether our future should be saved or allowed to happen.
But the clip does not contain that complete story. It does not name a source. It does not show a document, a sample, or an experiment. And more importantly, a strikingly similar account had already been public for more than a decade.
So this is not a reconstruction of a war between two futures. It is an investigation into how that story was built. Who was Amy Eskridge? What was she actually studying? Where did P47 and P52 enter the record? What does the Pentagon's own UAP material support, and what does it reject? And why, after Amy died at only 34, did her death become evidence in the minds of people who already believed her claims?
To answer any of that, we have to keep three things separate: what the public record verifies, what Amy said, and what later storytellers added.
The story begins in Huntsville, Alabama, a city whose relationship with rockets is not promotional language. After the Second World War, Redstone Arsenal became a center of American missile development. NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center grew beside it. The University of Alabama in Huntsville developed in the same technical ecosystem. Here, propulsion is not an abstract subject. It is part of the local economy, the family history of thousands of residents, and the institutional identity of the city. That matters because extraordinary claims do not arrive in a vacuum. In Huntsville, a conversation about propulsion can include a university researcher, an Army engineer, a NASA contractor, and a person whose exact work cannot be discussed publicly. Secrecy around ordinary advanced aerospace projects is real. So is the temptation to treat that secrecy as confirmation of a much larger hidden world.
Those are different propositions. A city can contain classified programs without containing a working time machine. A witness can know credible aerospace professionals without every story circulating among them being accurate. The distinction we will return to throughout this film is credibility by proximity. Being close to serious institutions can make a claim worth examining. It cannot replace the evidence for the claim itself.
Amy's story begins inside that tension. Amy Catherine Eskridge was born into that world in 1987. She graduated from UAH with degrees in chemistry and biological sciences. Her 2018 resume describes laboratory and commercial work, touching recombinant proteins, biotechnology, non-viral delivery systems, and microelectromechanical devices. It also records internships connected to MEMS research for the U.S. Army's Aviation and Missile Research, Development, and Engineering Center.
That background needs precision because online descriptions often inflate it. Amy is frequently called a physicist, a propulsion scientist, or Dr. Amy Eskridge. The contemporary record is narrower. In December 2018, the Huntsville, Alabama L5 Society described her as a chemistry graduate and a current materials science PhD student at UAH. Her own resume says she had previously completed the coursework for a biotechnology and bioscience engineering PhD, but not the dissertation. We did not locate a completed dissertation or a peer-reviewed gravity modification paper under her name in UAH's repository, OpenAlex, or Crossref. That does not erase her technical experience. It tells us what we can responsibly claim about it. It also tells us what kind of expertise the documents establish. Chemistry, biotechnology, microdevices, software, and materials research are substantial fields. They are not interchangeable with experimental gravitation, general relativity, or propulsion engineering. Interdisciplinary work can cross those borders, but the crossing has to be shown through methods and results, not through a more impressive job title.
Amy was also an entrepreneur. She worked on software and privacy projects and became president and co-founder of the Institute for Exotic Science. Its archived website described it as a privately held, for-profit research institution interested in propulsion, materials, quantum computing, communications, and technologies that might support a future space economy. The other central figure was her father, Richard Eskridge. His propulsion career is not simply family legend. NASA's Technical Reports Server records his work at Marshall Space Flight Center on plasmoid thrusters, including a prototype report, a related patent, and later pulsed plasma propulsion research. The surviving technical report looks nothing like a UFO story. It describes a prototype, operating principles, engineering progress, and the practical limits of the work. That difference is useful. Documented research leaves a trail that another engineer can inspect even when the device is unfinished.
That distinction matters. Richard's NASA work is independently documented. Amy's public role is documented as a chemist, entrepreneur, graduate student, and institute leader. Neither fact proves that the family discovered a method of altering gravity.
But it explains why people listened when Amy spoke. She was not an anonymous account posting a story from an unknown location. She came from Rocket City, knew people inside its propulsion culture, and spoke with the confidence of someone who believed she was standing at the edge of a discovery. When viewers later encountered a short clip about future humans, all of this background arrived with it. NASA. Redstone, a graduate program, a family propulsion company. Each real detail made the next unverified detail feel less distant.
That psychological movement is understandable, but evidence cannot be inherited by association. Richard's thruster paper supports Richard's thruster work. Amy's resume supports the experience described in the resume. Neither document supports P47, P52, or backward time travel. The next question is what the public record shows that discovery to be.
On December 6, 2018, Amy gave a public talk at the Huntsville, Madison County, Maine Public Library. Its title was A Historical Perspective on Antigravity Technology. The surviving slide deck is one of the strongest primary sources we have because it shows what Amy chose to present when she knew an audience was watching. She moved through a long and uneven history. Nikola Tesla, Townsend Brown, John Searle, the Dean Drive, Eric Lathwaite, James Woodward, Ning Li, Eugene Podkletnov, Claude Poher, Boeing's GRASP study, and the Pentagon program that became known publicly as AATIP. The names do not all belong in the same scientific category. Some represent published theoretical work. Some are associated with disputed experiments. Some became famous through demonstrations whose interpretation was contested. Others survive mainly through stories about tests that were never independently reproduced. That mixture is not a flaw unique to Amy. It is the structure of anti-gravity history. A surprising effect is announced. Replication fails or remains ambiguous. Funding disappears. Classification is proposed as the reason the result vanished. Years later, the absence of a public device becomes evidence that the successful version must have gone underground.
The deck does not treat every claim as proven. Some slides use words such as unsubstantiated and supposedly. Others note that particular experiments were widely criticized or could not be reproduced. Its conclusion argues that gravity research needs testable hypotheses, serious experiments, and private funding. It also advances Amy's belief that promising work tends to disappear into classified programs. That is a historical and speculative survey. It is not a published experimental result.
One name in the deck is especially important because it returns us to Huntsville. During the 1990s, physicist Ning Li worked on possible links between superconductors and gravitational effects. The idea was not presented only on late-night radio. NASA Marshall and the University of Alabama in Huntsville appear together in the technical record. Earlier experiments elsewhere had reported small changes in the apparent weight of objects near rotating superconductors. If the effect were real, it would be extraordinary. It might point toward a coupling between electromagnetism, quantum matter, and gravity that conventional engineering had never exploited.
NASA and UAH tested part of that question. A published static experiment levitated bulk superconductors in a magnetic field and monitored acceleration with sensitive gravimetry. The measured change was less than 2 parts in 100 million of normal gravitational acceleration. A later Marshall research report describes the broader static field tests more plainly. It says no gravitational field change was found above the stated threshold. Apparent signals were ultimately attributed to explainable phenomena. This is not proof that every conceivable rotating or radio frequency experiment must fail. It is a documented null result for the configuration that was tested.
And null results rarely become legends. The dramatic claim survives because it opens a door. The careful limit disappears because it closes only one part of the room. Years later, a new audience hears that NASA investigated gravity and superconductors in Huntsville. The sentence is true. What is often lost is what the investigation reported.
This is why the phrase antigravity needs unpacking. It can refer to gravitational shielding, a reduction in measured weight, an inertial effect, a novel propulsion force, or simply a device that levitates electromagnetically while gravity remains unchanged. Those are not equivalent mechanisms. A demonstration that rises from a table is not automatically controlling gravity. A theoretical coupling is not automatically a usable drive, and an unexplained measurement is not automatically a vehicle.
Amy's 2018 presentation understood at least part of that difficulty. Her conclusion called for testable hypotheses, serious experimental design, and private funding. The slides also expressed her suspicion that promising discoveries tend to disappear into classified programs. That suspicion gave the Institute for Exotic Science a mission. If government laboratories absorbed important work, a private institute could develop the technology publicly and prevent it from vanishing again. It is a compelling reason to create an organization. It is not evidence that the organization had already solved the problem. Amy's documented scientific work before the Institute was mostly in chemistry, biotechnology, and micro-devices. In the 2020 interview, she describes spending roughly a decade around biotech and gene therapy-related work before returning to the gravity problem that had occupied her father. Then her language becomes much stronger than the 2018 slides. She says her family has discovered what people inaccurately call anti-gravity. She says publication has been delayed by intimidation, sabotage, and a network of people who both want the work released and warn her not to release it.
The interview does not include a device demonstration, a method section, numerical results, or a paper that an independent laboratory could test. Amy may have possessed work that never became public, but the public record can evaluate only what was made available. We searched the UAH repository and major scholarly indexes for an identifiable gravity modification publication under Amy's name. We did not locate one. That search cannot prove that no private draft, laboratory notebook, or unpublished result ever existed. It establishes the boundary of the public record available for verification. This gives us 3 different levels that are often compressed into one sentence online. First, Amy had real scientific education and laboratory experience. Second, she publicly surveyed unconventional gravity research and helped create an institute with ambitious goals. Third, she claimed that her family had actually discovered antigravity. The first two are documented. The third remains a claim without a public demonstration in the material we located.
This chapter, therefore, ends in a different place from where anti-gravity stories usually end. There was real technical culture in Huntsville. There were real theoretical questions. NASA and UAH conducted real tests. Amy gave a real public presentation and helped build a real organization. But the public trail moves from experiment to limit, from limit to ambition, and from ambition to a much stronger private claim. It does not move to a reproducible gravity device. And this pattern becomes essential when the conversation turns from gravity to visitors from the future. The recording that made Amy famous in the UFO community was not produced as a documentary interview. It was a long remote conversation with Jeremy Rise and Mark Sokol. The surviving version runs for roughly 2 hours and was edited after a microphone failure to remove dead air. The tone is informal, emotional, and often chaotic. Amy moves rapidly between people she knows, stories she has heard, technical ideas, personal experiences, surveillance claims, and theories about disclosure. That format matters. In a prepared scientific talk, a speaker chooses definitions and arranges evidence. In a legal deposition, questions can force dates, names, and sources into the record. In a long private-style conversation, people follow associations. One memory activates another. A possibility can enter the discussion beside a personal experience without either participant stopping to label the difference.
The edited recording should therefore be treated as a primary source for what Amy said, not as independent proof of everything she described. Its value is precision. We can hear her words, their order, the questions around them, and how little time the P47 P52 claim occupies inside a conversation lasting roughly 2 hours. Early in the conversation, she explains why she created the Institute.
Yeah, no, dude. I started the Institute for one reason, the Institute. I started it as a public-facing persona to disclose anti-gravity technology through, because I told Mark this. If you stick your neck out in public, at least someone notices if your head gets chopped off. If you stick your neck out in private, fuck you. They will bury you. They will burn down your house while you're sleeping in your bed, and it won't even make the news. That's why the Institute exists.
Later, she says physicist Hal Puthoff had visited her family home and discussed ultraterrestrials.
And I sat with him in my dining room over there at the dining room table, and he was talking about ultra-terrestrials. And basically, ultra-terrestrials are like, he talks about extraterrestrial. Extra implies that they're from somewhere else, from the outside. Extra implies they're from not here, from ultra-terrestrial.
They're from the dog.
They're not necessarily from the outside, they're from here.
Oh.
Puthoff did later publish a paper considering several broad models for unexplained phenomena: extraterrestrial, extradimensional, cryptoterrestrial, ancient or proto-human, and time traveler possibilities among them. But his public paper does not validate the labels P47 and P52. In the interview, the transition from Puthoff's broad ultraterrestrial discussion to those specific future populations is Amy's. The word ultraterrestrial can sound like a category already established by science. Here it functions as a family of possibilities, an intelligence associated with Earth but hidden from ordinary history, perhaps ancient, technologically advanced, extradimensional, or displaced in time. That is a hypothesis space, not an identification.
Amy says she was never interested in alien mythology and that what she knew came from direct experience and people she knew. Then she asks whether the others have heard of P52 and P47. Her description is short. They are us from the future. P47 means the present plus 47,000 years. P52 means the present plus 52,000. A calamity destroys most of the world. One group goes underground and survives. Another stays on the surface and somehow does not die. Notice what makes the passage memorable. The numbers are specific while the event is vague. 47,000 and 52,000 sound measured. The calamity has no date, cause, location, or mechanism. The labels create the feeling that the speaker is naming entries from an existing classification system, even though the source of that system is never identified.
That is the complete P47 P52 foundation in the interview. Amy does not say that the two groups are fighting. She does not say one wants the catastrophe to happen and the other wants to stop it. She does not connect the Greys to a genetic crisis or abductions. She does not mention settlements on the Moon or Mars. She does not explain how backward time travel works. And she never identifies the person or document from which the labels came. She also does not attach the groups to a dated UAP event, a radar trace, a biological sample, or a prediction. There is no claim in the passage that can be checked against a specific future observation.
That does not mean Amy was inventing the story while she spoke. She may have believed she was relaying information she had received from people she trusted. The recording cannot tell us whether the unnamed source was direct, second-hand, misunderstood, or part of an older narrative already moving through the community. What the recording can tell us is exactly how much later storytellers had to add. Those additions are the material that turned a strange fragment into a compelling 30-minute story. But they did not originate in this fragment. To find them, we have to move back from 2020 to a series of interviews published between 2006 and 2008. More than a decade before Amy's recording, a man named Dan Berish told Project Camelot that he had worked as a microbiologist inside a hidden program at S4, near Area 51. Berish claimed he had treated a being called a J-Rod, interacted with Majestic, and learned that some apparent extraterrestrials were actually human descendants traveling backward through time. In his account, biology, prophecy, secret government, and time travel become one system. The J-Rod's illness is connected to the future of the human species. The catastrophe divides possible descendants. Classified projects allegedly observe or manipulate timelines. Personal testimony supplies the links between every layer. No independent public record has verified the extraordinary parts of that biography. What matters here is not whether Berish's account was true. It is whether the architecture of P47 and P52 was already public.
It was. Project Camelot's 2008 summary describes P45 as present plus 45,000 years and P52 as present plus 52,000. It says both emerged after a future catastrophe. The gray-like J-rods survived below ground. A more human-looking branch left Earth, later reaching the Moon and Mars. The summary assigns the groups opposing motives. P45 allegedly needs the catastrophe to occur because it creates their history. P52 allegedly wants to prevent it. It also links the Greys to genetic sampling and adds treaties, stargates, and a device called Looking Glass. These claims were published as interviews and advocacy material, not as findings from an independent investigation. Project Camelot did not provide a recoverable J-Rod specimen, authenticated Majestic personnel file, functioning Looking Glass device, or scientific dataset establishing backward travel.
But as narrative architecture, the account is powerful. It answers almost every question Amy's later fragment leaves open. Why do the visitors look different? Because populations survived in different environments. Why would they return? Because their existence depends on a catastrophe. Why are there abduction stories? Because one branch needs genetic material. Why does the government hide the truth? Because secret treaties and timeline projects are already underway. Each answer makes the next part of the story feel necessary. The system becomes difficult to disprove because any missing evidence can be assigned to classification, altered history, or competition between timelines. Now place the accounts side by side. Amy says P47. The earlier story says P45. Both say P52. Both translate the labels as present plus tens of thousands of years. Both describe future humans divided after a catastrophe. Both include an underground population and a population that survives another way. The difference between 45 and 47,000 years is important, but not large enough to erase the shared structure. P52 remains identical. The naming rule remains identical. The catastrophe and split remain in place.
And the material found only in the earlier version is exactly what later retellings used to complete Amy's fragment: the grays, the genetic motive, and a conflict over the catastrophe.
There is no public evidence showing how Amy encountered the story. Her statement that she had never researched alien theories may have been sincere. She may have heard a modified version from someone else. P47 may be a changed or misremembered P45. Or she may have believed she had received the information independently. We cannot document the path. That missing path leaves several possibilities. Amy could have heard a variant from a person who had encountered the bearish material. The story could have circulated orally without Project Camelot being named. P47 could be a simple alteration produced by memory, or two people could have reported similar claims without direct contact. The documentary cannot choose among those possibilities without evidence. It can test whether the sources are demonstrably independent. They are not. What we can document is priority. P45 and P52 were publicly paired with future humans and a catastrophe by 2008 and discussed in recorded material as early as 2006. Amy's version appeared in 2020.
That does not automatically make the story false. An earlier witness could, in principle, have described the same hidden reality, but it changes the burden of proof. Similarity is no longer confirmation by two independent sources unless independence can be established. Without that, repetition may trace the movement of a story rather than the existence of two future civilizations.
This is one of the most important corrections in the film. If we had only Amy's clip, the labels would be a mysterious fragment from a technically connected witness. Once the older account is located, the mystery changes. We are no longer asking only, what did Amy know? We are asking, how does information move through a community, and what happens when the original source disappears from the retelling? The distinction does not ruin the story. It gives the story a history. Before we turn to the Pentagon, one scientific question has to be separated from the source question. Even if P47 and P52 emerged from an older mythology, could their central mechanism be possible? Could humans reach a future 50,000 years away and then return to our time? The phrase time travel hides three different experiences. The first happens every day. We move forward through time, 1 second at a time. The second is built into relativity. Two observers can begin together, follow different paths through motion and gravity, and meet again, having experienced different amounts of time. The third is the one P47 and P52 require. A traveler who exists tens of thousands of years in Earth's future appears at an earlier point in Earth's history. Only the first two are supported by experiment.
Einstein's theory does not give every observer one universal clock. At high relative speed, a moving clock accumulates less time than a clock that remained behind. Gravity also affects the rate at which clocks run. These are not science fiction decorations. Precision clocks flown on aircraft show small differences. Satellite navigation systems account for relativistic timing effects so that positions on Earth remain accurate. A sufficiently fast spacecraft could therefore carry its occupants far into Earth's future, while they aged much less than people who stayed here.
Imagine a ship traveling so close to the speed of light that only a few years pass for the crew while centuries pass on Earth. The travelers return to a planet whose history has raced ahead of them. That is a kind of one-way time machine. The engineering problem would be immense. Accelerating a crude vehicle to that speed requires extraordinary energy. Dust becomes dangerous. Radiation becomes severe. The travelers still cannot exceed the speed of light, but the underlying time difference is part of tested physics.
It does not solve Amy's claim. A person could use time dilation to arrive in Earth's year 52,000. A person already born in that year would not need a machine merely to exist there. The unexplained step is returning from that future to 2020 or earlier. Relativistic time dilation points forward. P47 and P52 require a route back.
Astronomy creates another confusion. A telescope can show the past because light needs time to travel. When we observe a galaxy a million light-years away, we see light that began its journey a million years ago. We have received information from the past. We have not entered it. No one in the telescope can change the event whose light is arriving. Backward travel appears in more exotic solutions to general relativity. Certain mathematical spacetimes contain closed time-like curves, paths that return to an earlier point in their own history. A traversable wormhole with two mouths experiencing different motion could, in some models, acquire a time shift between its entrances.
The words "in some models" carry most of the weight. No traversable wormhole has been discovered. Keeping one open appears to require matter or energy conditions unlike anything available for engineering at human scale. A mathematical solution can show that equations permit a geometry under assumed conditions. It does not show that nature creates the geometry, that it is stable, or that a civilization can build it. Einstein Online describes traversable wormholes as highly unrealistic and speculative model universes. That is not a declaration that every future theory must forbid them. It is the distance between an equation and a machine.
Then comes causality. If a traveler can return before departure, an effect may appear before its cause. The familiar grandfather paradox is only the simplest version. Information could circulate without an origin. A decision made in the future could prevent the conditions that produced the decision. Physics does not resolve these problems by storytelling alone. In 1992, Stephen Hawking proposed the chronology protection conjecture. He examined whether quantum effects near a would-be time machine would grow so large that their gravitational backreaction prevented closed time-like curves from forming.
Hawking's conclusion strongly favored protection of chronology, but the word conjecture matters. There is no complete experimental theory of quantum gravity that proves every possible backward time geometry impossible. The responsible scientific position is not, time travel to the past has been proven impossible. It is, some equations contain roots that resemble backward time travel, but no physical mechanism, stable machine, or experiment has demonstrated that a traveler can use them. Serious theoretical arguments suggest nature may prevent it.
Now return to Amy's wording. P47 and P52 are defined by dates relative to the present. They are not defined by a propulsion method. Amy does not describe a wormhole, a closed time-like curve, an energy source, or a rule preventing paradoxes. She does not explain whether the groups inhabit one fixed history, branching histories, or simulations of possible outcomes. The older bearish mythology supplies devices and timeline projects, but it supplies them as testimony, not as engineering. Without a mechanism, the numbers tell us where the visitors allegedly come from, not how they arrived.
Their appearance creates a second scientific question. 50,000 years is a long period compared with recorded civilization. It is shorter than the roughly 300,000 years Homo sapiens has already existed. Smithsonian research notes that several human species still shared the planet around 70,000 years ago, so future populations could change. Natural selection, isolation, disease, environment, founder effects, and deliberate genetic engineering could all influence descendants over thousands of generations.
But evolution is not a character designer working toward the classic gray. Large black eyes, a reduced jaw, hairless skin, and an enlarged head are familiar, because decades of UFO culture made them familiar. No accepted model of human evolution predicts that exact package for an underground population. No biological sample connects the image to a future lineage. Even the older mythology does not turn that image into evidence. It explains the appearance after the claim has already been accepted.
This chapter leaves the future human hypothesis in a precise position. Time dilation demonstrates that travel into the future is physically real in a limited sense. Human descendants could look different after 50,000 years. Neither statement demonstrates backward travel, identifies a visitor, or validates P47 and P52.
Extraordinary evidence could force science to reconsider what mechanisms are possible. A material sample, repeatable signal, or vehicle with measurable behavior would matter more than our current expectations. That is why the next chapter does not ask whether the Pentagon has explained every UAP. It asks whether the public government record contains evidence strong enough to require a theory as extraordinary as visitors from the future. For decades, official interest in UFOs was surrounded by denial, fragmented programs, and records that were difficult to access. That situation has changed. The United States now has a formal office called AARO, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. Congress requires reports. Military personnel have channels for submitting encounters. NASA has published a study focused on improving the quality of UAP data. The subject is no longer dismissed simply because someone used the wrong acronym.
The latest public consolidated annual report, located for this review, is the fiscal year 2024 report published in November 2024. Later classified reporting may exist, and individual cases continue to be discussed, but we did not locate a newer public consolidated report on the official AARO, Defense Department, or ODNI channels as of July 2026. That date boundary matters. Government transparency is not real-time access to every investigation. But official attention is not an official endorsement of the most dramatic explanation. Start with the strongest reason to keep investigating. The Department of Defense says AARO received 757 reports in the period covered by its fiscal year 2024 report. 21 were judged worthy of further analysis with intelligence and science partners because of reported anomalous characteristics or behaviors. Some military cases involve trained observers. Some include more than one sensor. A case can remain unresolved after serious review, and that is a legitimate finding. The same report records 2 flight safety concerns from military aircrews and 3 accounts in which pilots said they were trailed or shadowed. AARO said it had not confirmed those events as foreign adversary activity. Those are operational reasons to investigate even before anyone proposes a non-human explanation.
Then there are the witnesses. In July 2023, former intelligence officer David Grush testified under oath before a House committee. He said people with direct knowledge had described a secret crash retrieval and reverse engineering program to him. During questioning, he said biologics associated with recovered craft were described as non-human by people he considered directly involved. Pilots David Fravor and Ryan Grave also testified about unusual encounters and the difficulty military aviators faced when reporting them.
Those statements are serious because of who made them, the setting in which they were made, and the oversight questions they raise. They are not the same as public proof of a non-human craft. Grush did not present a recoverable vehicle, biological sample, laboratory report, or complete chain of custody during the public hearing. Much of his account was based on what other people told him, with details he said could be provided only in a classified setting. The hearing supports investigation. It does not identify P47 or P52.
Supporters of Grush raise a fair objection. The most sensitive evidence, if it exists, would not necessarily be displayed in a public hearing. Classification can prevent a witness from naming programs, locations, and people. A lack of public exhibits does not prove that every private allegation is false.
It also cannot make the private allegation publicly verified. For an audience outside the classified process, the evidentiary position remains testimony about what other people allegedly saw and handled. The proper conclusion is a demand for oversight, not a declaration that the underlying claim has already been proven.
Now consider the official argument against an extraordinary conclusion. AARO's 2024 historical review says it found no empirical evidence that the United States government or private companies had been reverse engineering extraterrestrial technology. It says some accounts of hidden programs resulted from authentic classified aerospace work being misidentified or described without full access. The annual numbers also need to be read completely.
Of the 757 reports in the fiscal year 2024 report, AARO resolved 49 during the reporting period. Another 243 were recommended for closure after review. Those cases were attributed to ordinary objects such as balloons, birds, drones, satellites, and aircraft. 21 merited more analysis. The largest group, 444 cases, lacked enough data to reach an attribution. That last category is often misused. Insufficient data does not mean extraordinary technology. It means the evidence cannot carry a conclusion in either direction.
The report's executive summary uses a second accounting window. It says 118 cases were resolved during the broader report work, and that another 174 queued cases had been finalized as prosaic by the publication date. The analytic table uses the June 1st cutoff, 49 resolved and 243 recommended for closure.
Those numbers describe the same continuing process at different stages. They should not be added together as separate populations. The report also reveals how limited some files are. Of the 757 reports, 392 came from Federal Aviation Administration logs reaching back to 2021. 49 were described as space domain reports, but none originated from a space-based sensor. They came from pilots or ground observers estimating that an object was at very high altitude. During the reporting period, AARO says it did not receive UAP reports collected directly through National Geospatial, Signals, or Measurement and Signatures intelligence platforms. It could search partner databases when individual cases required it, but the baseline reports did not automatically arrive with every possible intelligence stream attached.
This is why the word unexplained can describe very different situations. One case may contain several synchronized sensors and behavior that resists a conventional model. Another may contain a light, an estimated direction, no range, no image, and no opportunity to collect more data. Both can remain unresolved. They do not have the same evidentiary weight. NASA makes a similar distinction. It says there is currently no credible evidence that UAP are extraterrestrial and no evidence that individual UAP reports demonstrate alien technology. At the same time, NASA says the limited number of high-quality observations makes firm scientific conclusions difficult. The honest official position is therefore less satisfying than either side wants. Many cases are ordinary, many are too poorly documented to decide. A smaller number deserve continued analysis. None of that publicly establishes visitors from another star, another dimension, or another time.
AARO's conclusions also have limits. An official historical review can be incomplete if records were destroyed, mislabeled, withheld, or never created. Critics dispute whether every relevant witness and special access compartment was reached. But the inverse mistake is equally serious. The possibility that a review missed evidence does not establish the evidence that was allegedly missed. The public record must still distinguish a criticism of process from proof of a hidden vehicle. There is a logical wrinkle. Amy's visitors would not be extraterrestrials. They would be human descendants from Earth. So when NASA says it has no evidence UAP are extraterrestrial, that sentence does not directly disprove a future human hypothesis. but escaping one negative statement is not positive evidence. No AARO, Pentagon, NASA, or ODNI document located in this review uses P47 or P52 as an analytic category. No official case is publicly connected to Amy's two numbers. No government report supplies the missing source behind her claim.
In November 2024, journalist Michael Schellenberger submitted written testimony to another House hearing. Attached to it was an enormous public domain timeline collecting official records, witness statements, media reports, books, anonymous claims, and UFO mythology. That appendix includes Dan Barish's P45 and P52 story. It describes the groups as Barish's claims and links to Project Camelot. It does not say the Pentagon verified them.
This is a common source error online. A claim appearing in a document submitted to Congress is described as a congressional document. The phrase sounds official, but the status of the material has not changed. A witness compiled it. Congress received it. Congress did not thereby investigate and confirm every entry.
The same appendix would later become important to the darkest part of Amy's story. Before we go there, imagine an evidence ladder. At the bottom is a report. A person says something happened. Above that is a multi-sensor observation. Several instruments or witnesses record related information. Then comes raw data with a documented chain of custody. Then a physical sample available to independent laboratories. At the top is a result that can be reproduced or an event that can be predicted.
P47 and P52 currently remain at the first level. The labels come from relayed claims. They have not been connected publicly to a sample, a dataset, a reproducible gravity effect, or a case that predicts something before it happens. That conclusion may be less cinematic than a hidden war across time. It is also where the evidence stops.
And yet, online, the story rarely stops there. It passes through different containers. Each new container can make the same allegation look more official than it was before. Consider the journey of a single statement. It begins inside a 2-hour conversation. A speaker pauses, changes subject, and describes something learned from unnamed people. Someone extracts 40 seconds. The hesitation disappears. The clip receives a title. Scientist reveals 2 future human races. A social post summarizes the clip. The summary adds the grays because viewers recognize the image. Another post adds a war because the story now needs a conflict. An article cites the posts. A video cites the article. None of the later versions returns to the full recording.
The number of sources appears to grow while the number of independent sources remains 1. This is called source laundering. Information passes through new containers until its origin is difficult to see. Each container can borrow credibility from its format, a news layout, a documentary voice, a government letterhead, or a phrase such as entered into the congressional record. The claim itself may remain unchanged or become more specific. Its evidence has not improved merely because the typography has.
P47 and P52 offer a complete worked example. Amy's clip supplies 2 numbers, future humans, a calamity, and 2 survival paths. The older bearish material supplies the gray-like descendants, genetic problem, off-world population, and opposing missions. Later retellings merge the accounts. Amy becomes the source for a complete narrative she did not state in the located passage. Then Amy's technical background supplies institutional proximity. Huntsville becomes NASA. Her father's documented thruster becomes family antigravity. A graduate student biography becomes doctor or physicist. Separate facts are compressed into a more authoritative character.
None of those changes requires a deliberate hoax. People summarize. Memory prefers coherent stories. Algorithms reward certainty and conflict. A title with 2 future factions at war travels farther than a title saying an informal claim with no named source. The result can be misinformation without a single person inventing the entire package.
Government documents create another transformation. In 2024, Michael Schellenberger submitted written testimony to a House hearing. His appendix assembled a vast timeline from official records, media reports, books, interviews, anonymous claims, and UFO literature. The timeline's existence is real. Its submission is real. The hearing is real, but entries inside the appendix retain the quality of their original sources. A Project Camelot claim does not become a Pentagon finding because a witness places it beside Pentagon events in a document Congress receives.
3 questions prevent that error. Who wrote the document? What kind of document is it? What source does the specific sentence cite? An agency assessment, a sworn witness statement, a staff report, and an appendix of public claims can all appear on an official website. They do not carry the same evidentiary status.
The transformation also works emotionally. When a witness later dies, earlier statements about threats are replayed after the outcome is known. Ordinary uncertainty becomes foreshadowing. Every technical problem becomes sabotage. Every unfinished project becomes something someone needed to suppress. The human mind is exceptionally good at building a line backward from a tragedy.
That line may reveal a real pattern. It may also be created by selection. To distinguish the two, investigators need records produced near the events, messages, reports, medical findings, security footage, named witnesses, and consistent dates. Retrospective coherence is not enough.
This does not mean the audience should distrust every unofficial witness or believe every official denial. It means each statement keeps its original burden of proof. Amy's words remain her words. Berish's account remains his account. AARO's report remains the conclusion of an official review with stated methods and limits. Schellenberger's appendix remains a witness submission containing material of many different kinds. And Amy's death must be examined through the records about the death, not through the dramatic needs of the mythology that grew around it. On June 11, 2022, Amy Catherine Eskridge died in Huntsville. She was 34 years old. Her family-sponsored obituary remembers her scientific curiosity, her entrepreneurship, and her vision for the Institute. It does not state a cause of death. In the years that followed, fragments from the 2020 interview began to circulate with new force. Amy had said people warned her she could be killed. She described alleged break-ins, surveillance, stalking, and intimidation. In the interview, those accounts are first-person claims. No police report, forensic record, or independent investigation is presented alongside them.
Later, former British military intelligence officer Frank Milburn alleged that Amy had been targeted with a directed energy weapon and murdered by a private aerospace company because of her propulsion work. We did not locate public evidence substantiating that allegation. In 2024, Schellenberger's witness appendix repeated Milburn's claim in its timeline. That placement is frequently presented online as if Congress confirmed Amy was murdered. It did not.
The appendix itself shows why caution is necessary. It gives Amy's death as June 15th and says she was 35. The obituary says June 11th and age 34. The entry is a compilation of an allegation, not the result of a police inquiry or a congressional finding.
In April 2026, NewsNation reported that Amy's death had been ruled a suicide. The report also said her father, Richard Eskridge, rejected claims that it was suspicious. His position was direct. Scientists die like other people, and he did not believe her research explained her death. We have not located a publicly linked coroner report, autopsy, or police case file in the source set for this documentary. That missing primary record should be acknowledged. It should not be replaced with an accusation for which no public proof has emerged.
There are two facts that can coexist without one proving the other. Amy said in 2020 that she felt threatened and surveilled. Amy died 2 years later. Sequence is not causation. To connect the events, investigators would need authenticated messages, records of the alleged intrusions, medical and forensic evidence, named responsible parties, and a chain linking a motive to the death. None of that has been made public in the material we found.
There is also a human reason not to turn uncertainty into entertainment. A person's death is not an empty space that an audience is entitled to fill with the most dramatic theory. The responsible conclusion is limited but clear. Amy's death became part of the P47 P52 mythology. The public evidence currently available does not establish that she was killed because of gravity research, UAP, or anything she said in the interview.
After removing the additions, correcting the source history, and reading the official record, is there anything left of the future human idea? There is a hypothesis. There is not yet an evidentiary case. The strongest argument in its favor begins with a real limitation in the word extraterrestrial. A phenomenon associated with Earth would escape a framework that assumes visitors must arrive from another planet. Physics also confirms that time is not identical for every observer. Motion and gravity affect the rate at which clocks pass. Humans already correct for relativistic effects in satellite navigation.
But measurable time dilation is not a machine traveling 47,000 years into the past. No experiment has shown a person, vehicle, or message moving backward across that distance in time.
A second argument is biological. Tens of thousands of years, isolated environments, and deliberate genetic engineering could change human appearance. A future descendant might not look exactly like us.
That makes transformation conceivable. It does not demonstrate that the classic gray is a transformed human, or that any reported being exists outside testimony and imagery of uncertain provenance.
A third argument is institutional. A small number of UAP cases remain unresolved. Military witnesses have described events they could not explain, and secrecy around advanced aerospace programs has produced genuine confusion before.
Unresolved cases create a research question, not a preferred answer. P47 P52 has not predicted the location, behavior, timing, or measurable signature of any official case. A theory that can explain every possible observation after it happens is difficult to test and easy to preserve.
Now the case against. The labels appear in Amy's interview without a named source or supporting evidence. The complete conflict narrative is not in her statement. A closely related P45 P52 mythology was public years earlier. The most dramatic details come from that older, unverified story and from later retellings. No public gravity result under Amy's name validates the mechanism. No official UAP document connects a case to the labels, and no physical evidence establishes either future population.
Amy's Huntsville background makes the story more interesting. It does not make each statement true. Barish's earlier account makes the story older. It does not make two sources independent. The Pentagon's unresolved cases make UAP investigation legitimate. They do not make future humans the default explanation. And the tragedy of Amy's death makes the story emotionally powerful. It does not provide evidence for murder or for P47 P52.
This is the line a serious documentary has to hold. It can remain curious without pretending uncertainty points only toward the extraordinary. It can take a witness seriously without turning the witness into proof. Return to the original recording, and the entire mystery still fits inside two numbers, P47, P52. Amy said they were us from the future, descendants separated by a calamity that had not happened yet. To move that statement beyond mythology, something must cross the boundary between story and test, a document with verifiable provenance, a material sample available to independent laboratories, raw sensor data that can be examined outside a classified summary. A gravity experiment whose method and result another team can reproduce, or a prediction specific enough to fail.
Until then, P47 and P52 are not two civilizations established by the evidence. They are two labels at the intersection of one woman's extraordinary claims, an older UFO mythology, and a real government mystery that remains much narrower than the story built around it.
The question is still worth asking, but the most important part of any mystery is knowing exactly where the evidence ends.